Following Queen Anne's War, the Massachusetts General Court was eager to resettle Maine. The mid-coast area was chosen as a general site for colonization, and this included the Thopsham area. The Cathance River was first utilized in 1714, after it was chosen as a prospective area for a mill by a delegation dispatched from Massachusetts. It was chosen along with the Bunganuck Stream in McCoy Bay. The Bunganuck Mill served the coastal inhabitants, while the Cathance Mill served the Thopsham area and other towns around Merrymeeting Bay.
Now by 1716 the mill had been built and was in operation. The head of tide is a very special area because the river changes significantly at the falls. It is fresh water above the falls. Below the falls is a mixing zone. From Merrymeeting Bay upstream to the head of tide there is a tidal flow. That was a great transportation highway in order to get the lumber out and to the various communities within the region. The mill was shipping to those communities that had been established, and by 1717 Joseph Heath had a grant to run the mill for 3 years. He was also the clerk for the proprietors. He is extremely occupied, however, because of native hostilities, and the amount of production from the mill during that period was probably minimal.
In 1719, the Pejepscot proprietors deeded the Cathance Mill and 500 acres of timberland to fellow proprietors Oliver Noyes and John Wentworth. The mill continued running somewhat smoothly, but the surrounding community was subjected to more than their fair share of trials. In 1722, a devastating Native American attack on Pejepscot proprietor holdings, described in this letter by Colonel Harmon, scared away many settlers.
The mill was not without competition. In 1738, Peter Noel, who had built the head of tide mill for the Pejepscot proprietors, constructed a mill on the Abagadasset River that competed with the Thopsham mill.
By 1750, more families had begun moving into the area. A large number of these were Scots-Irish. The fear of Indian raids had subsided somewhat, but times continued to be hard for the people of Thopsham.
About this time, a group from Massachusetts bought the Plymouth Grant on the Kennebec River, just north of the Pejepscot holdings. This led to a land dispute with the Pejepscot proprietors over who actually owned that section of land. One claimed that the other owned it, and the other claimed the same. The border for this dispute was the Cathance River.
The families that moved into the region around head of tide in the 1750s were interested in reestablishing the mill as a commercial focal point, and they gained title to the land and the mill rights from the descendants of proprietors Wentworth and Noyes.
These titles set apart land from the head of tide downstream. The land was divided among Samuel Winchell, James Hunter, James Staples, Adam Hunter, Joseph Graves, Samuel Graves, John Fulton, and John Patton. This successful partnership fell apart when Samuel Winchell and Samuel Staples purchased 500 acres of land half a mile upstream at what was known as the Upper Falls, with the intent of building a competing sawmill.
In 1764, the sawmill was in full operation. That same year, Thopsham was actually incorporated into Lincoln County, and then later into Sagadahoc County when it was newly formed.
By 1781, Samuel Winchell owned not only part of the sawmill at head of tide and part of the mill at the Upper Falls, but also 7/8 of a newly constructed gristmill on the opposite shore at head of tide. His nephew, James Henry Jr., owned the rest of the gristmill.
John Mitchell, who was one of the 1750 proprietors, along with Winchell, of the first sawmill, became a partner with Winchell in the upstream second sawmill. This remains somewhat of a mystery because we're not sure what happened to this mill. It vanishes from our records after 1783.
That same year, Samuel Winchell died. At that time, he was the sole owner of the gristmill operation at head of tide. In 1818, the gristmill is last mentioned in records when it is leased to William Barry by its owners.
The Trenton Flint and Spar Company was mining the feldspar quarries along the Cathance by the mid-1850s. And they were taking the stone from the quarries, loading it onto barges, shipping it down the Cathance River past Bodenham, through Merrymeeting Bay to Bath, where it was reloaded onto vessels that took it to New Jersey. There it was ground up and mixed with the fine New Jersey clays, where the company could produce ceramics and earthenware that was of very high quality. This included plates, dishes, teapots, and so forth. The company decided that it would be much more profitable to grind the stone in Thopsham and ship the powdered feldspar to New Jersey. So they sought to buy the water rights and the landing on the west shore from the Fisher family, who by 1869 had secured the rights to the land on both shores at head of tide. Now the Fisher family was operating a sawmill on the east shore at that time. On the west shore was the location of the former grist mill. It was sold, a deal was struck, and the Trenton Flint and Spar Company built their feldspar operation. And it goes into operation in 1871. The Fisher family will take the money from that and refurbish their sawmill and put new machinery in and create a new yard for the product being turned out.
On April 26, 1888, Trenton Flint and Spar bought up the sawmill, its machinery, and water rights to expand their successful operation. The Trenton mill was destroyed November 30th, 1910 by a fire, and almost a year later to the day, the newly built mill was destroyed. Arson was suspected, but no one was ever arrested.
By the late 1920s and early 1930s, feldspar production had slowed, largely due to competition in North Carolina. It just became easier for Trenton Flint and Spar to get the product from a closer source. The Depression also added to the difficulties in continuing production. The mill was sold to two different local families who struggled to keep it in operation. Finally, a Brunswick entrepreneur, Emery Booker, bought the mill and started selling the feldspar as chicken grit.
In the 1950s, the Maine poultry industry took a dive, and the mill stopped producing feldspar for chicken grit. The commercial life of the Cathance River had come to an end, and so, too, had an era in Maine's history. In 2008, the deteriorating mill building was burnt as a drill for the Thopsham Fire Department. Currently, the head of tide area is being considered as a possible site for a park and historical site.